Welcome to the ClassicalU Podcast. ClassicalU is a training platform with over 100 self-paced online courses and new content added regularly. We customize and brand learning pathways, serving schools as well as offering individual subscriptions to parents, teachers, and school leaders. Visit ClassicalU.com to learn more. I'm the director, Jesse Hake. On this show, I interview our course presenters as well as authors and leaders in classical education, talking about running a great classroom, teaching the human and fine arts, the great books. We're delighted to have you listening. Thank you for joining us. Patrick, it's so great to have you joining us for a conversation about your new book on ClassicalU's podcast show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. You've written a book, Be Still and Know, Contemplative Practice for Christian Schools and Educators. And you're a professor of practical theology or pastoral theology, is that right?
Yeah, pastoral theology, that's
Pastoral
right.
theology, yes. And this is your second book. You've also written on the topic of converting the imagination, teaching to recover Jesus' vision for the fullness of life. So your new book with Erdman's has a ton of overlap with things that are near and dear to our audience and to materials that we have with Classical Academic Press and ClassicalU. So when this book was recommended to us by a mutual friend, Jessica Hooten-Wilson, I was just so impressed with the recommendation and have so enjoyed reading it. So I'm very much appreciating your time talking to us about this.
Well, thank you. It's a joy to be talking with people, thinking with people who are concerned with these kind of things. So I feel we're very much on the same page in a lot of regards. So I've been looking forward to this. Good.
Thank you. I know you write to a broad Christian audience as well as to a broad audience of educators. You're speaking to, Christian education, broadly speaking, and you do recognize, as an author, your own tradition. But I noticed in the book you're really going above and beyond to invite everyone from all Christian traditions in to these contemplative practices and the deep history of that in education generally, and specifically in Christian education. But how did you come, onto this topic, and how does it connect a little bit to your own life story and journey?
Yeah. No, it's very much a piece with my own story. So you mentioned I'm a professor of pastoral theology. I teach at the seminary for the Archdiocese of Newark, which is located here on the campus of Seton Hall University. So I've been here 10 years, and now quite a number of years back, I was at a faculty development event for the university talking with the director of our Center for Faculty Development here. And she had noticed that there were more and more initiatives and even centers, institutes popping up around the country at universities dedicated to contemplative pedagogy.
Yeah.
And she didn't know very much about it at the time. Frankly, I did not know much about it at the time. But my own prayer life had taken a contemplative turn. And so the phrase kind of caught my interest. And she and I kept talking about that. And that eventually led to a faculty reading group that became a full-fledged seminar that turned into one of the most beautiful experiences of my time at Seton Hall, working with this group of faculty to whom I dedicated this book, actually, and seeing the tremendous impact that these contemplative practices had for these faculty, not only in terms of their teaching and what was happening in their classrooms and what they were able to offer their students, but for themselves and for the way that it enhanced their lives and enhanced their relationships. Yeah. And so that was really that seminal transformative experience that brought to light for me, like, there is really something here. And then I had the opportunity while I was on sabbatical one year to really dig deeply into the Christian tradition and excavate everything that was there. And there was so much that I thought you mentioned. I'm Catholic myself. So much there that that most Catholics are unaware of, and I would dare to say most Christians are not fully aware of all the richness of this contemplative tradition.
Yeah, you must have really been digging deep. You mentioned the Philokalia. I'm a convert, into the Orthodox tradition myself, and our priests warn us, don't get all excited and big-headed, and go reading the Philokalia. It's sort of like the deep waters. But you do a really great job of you're mining the deep places in our history, but you're really coming straight to practical and accessible recommendations. So in your story there, you're bringing this to college educators, but the book is largely pitched to K-12 context. Is that right?
I would say
maybe
more,
it was just my reading lens, because
it's no. So honestly, I had envisioned a secondary and university or college level audience.
Okay,
as
so
I was writing
both
the book.
was in your view.
That's right. But as I was working on the book, I was not only doing the research of going into the text and the tradition, but I was also spending time at a variety of different kinds of schools on that sabbatical year, and that included elementary schools. And so, even though because I had to focus the book somehow, and mostly speaking, and most of the examples are focused on the high school and above. There's so much in the book that is applicable all the way down. And I've even done more work since. I have a website where I keep putting up new resources that I hope will support the work in K-8 schools as well.
Yeah. Professor David Smith writes your foreword, and that's just like another point of contact with our audience. He's published a book on Comenius with Classical Academic Press here, and speaks to this as well. Did you know him previously? Is there, I did. I'm sure you dipped into his writing on this topic as well. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. He, a mutual friend, Susan Felch, who was also there at Calvin University, she'd done work with him and put the two of us in touch. And I had the opportunity when I was in Grand Rapids one year to pay him a visit. And so he had invited me onto his podcast, and when I was very early stages of working on this project, and he was very supportive and encouraging then as well.
Yeah. The structure of your book, you've got basically you have a little history, and then you get practical. With Chapter 3, I think you really dive in, to the classroom, and then you talk about leadership and kind of the boardroom, and how this applies within, the students' own studying life, and then bringing in recreation, rest, and leisure. We use the Greek word for leisure, skole, around here a lot. One of the divisions of the company is Skole Academy, which is an online program. And then Christopher Perrin, our founder, CEO, has a course on the ClassicalU platform and a book that goes with that course on Skole, the Skole Way. So that concept of contemplation and leisure has just overlap all the way through. But am I representing the structure? You have the history and kind of the theory, and then you really you go practically in different parts of in different segments of a school community. Is that
that's
an
right.
accurate overview?
That's right. Yeah, because so as I was saying just a moment ago, I find that there's so many Christians who are not really aware of this dimension of our tradition. When you start talking about things like meditation or even contemplative practices, what I mentioned, my colleague here at Seton Hall was becoming aware of these, institutes and initiatives around contemplative practices at other universities, which were primarily secular. They were public universities.
We're being outdone by our secular counterparts.
That's right. And even when, many Christians, hear about, meditation or anything of that nature, their mind goes to Eastern religious traditions.
Yeah.
And so, so that's why right off the bat in the book, I wanted to do that work to help people recognize that this is something that is not only a part of the Christian tradition, but in some ways, I would argue central. That when we go back to the earliest centuries A.D., looking at like the desert fathers and mothers, I think that's where a lot of people would point to as sort of the origin of these kind of contemplative practices of a silent contemplative kind of prayer. Of a nepsis, this watchfulness, really cultivating the inner depths, and they would point even further back to Jesus himself. Going off to quiet places to pray, his repulsion of the tempter in the desert. Using those lines of scripture. And so I just, so I felt it was necessary to put that in so that people in the context of Christian schools could embrace this as something that is authentically Christian, that is in fact, has very deep roots in our own tradition.
Yeah, it's this kind of irony of history, right? That Christians are suspicious of something that they really gave to the educational tradition as a great gift in very deep ways. And now it's seen as this kind of foreign, or from another religion, Buddhism or what have you, and we're sort of suspicious of it. Whereas we really were deep practitioners of this historically for so long, and gave so much. And you cover that history, all the way up through, as you just said, up into the Middle Ages and beyond, up to really contemporary times. There's still this practice out there that's you're opening it up to to everyone, and saying look, the secular educational audience is realizing the profound benefits of this for teachers and students. They're doing it, and they're primarily not even realizing themselves that it's available in the Christian tradition. So they're going to other Eastern religions and tapping into it there.
And that really was a major motivation for this book. Because I was looking as an educator. I really first and foremost think of myself as a teacher. Yeah. And as an educator, who's worked at all different levels, and has been confronted with this constellation of issues that I think many teachers are facing today, with the students' mental health, the decreased attention spans, the struggles a lot of students are having connecting with one another. Grappling for resources, how to deal with this. And in fact, many places are turning towards, contemplative practices. Oftentimes they've been kind of, sanitized, stripped of their religious context to make them palatable to a wider audience. But it just struck me as odd that, we have I'm aware at least of Catholic schools that are utilizing mindfulness curricula to deal with their student mental health issues. And so I was sort of scratching my head over this, that we have this incredibly beautiful and deep tradition of contemplation within Christianity. We don't need to be importing something from the outside. And so it's, again, I felt the need to, it's not a primarily a historical book that I've written, but I felt the need to have that in there.
But that's kind of the way in.
Right, to lower the barrier to entry, to assure people that this is part of our tradition. And then the vast majority of the book is very practical in terms of, I try and help to walk the reader through a school day, to imagine all the various activities from, beginning with the morning commute all the way until the time that you're leaving and signing off for the week, and thinking how that contemplative tradition, the wisdom, the practices there can really enhance what we are doing, and in fact help us to be more deeply Christian. Yeah.
And that practical help really shows up. So you do that in so many different ways. Reframing time and rhythm, was one major theme I noted, and so powerful. What would be your kind of elevator pitch on that topic to hook educators as far as the value of this idea of reframing time and rhythm as a way into this in a more holistic kind of application?
In the time that I was researching this book and spending that time embedded in a variety of different schools, I came to the conclusion that the school schedule is perhaps the most formative aspect of the school schedule. And I say that, in fear and trembling, because having worked with a variety of educators and school leadership, I know it's, to touch the school schedule is that third rail. It can be very difficult.
Yeah.
But I say that because, in our Christian schools, we can teach our students about the importance of worship, of prayer, of leisure, and even participate in those things with them in various ways. But if the schedule of the school itself and the ways that the educators, that the students are moving through their days runs counter to that, as it often does, there, we are embodied beings, and as people in classical education know, is that our habits form us in virtuous or vicious kinds of ways, and the ways that we inhabit and mark time are a major piece of that formation.
Yeah,
and so so I try and turn our attention to that in the book to help us look at, I start every chapter off with a bit of a, vignette, an anecdote of the way that we often experience life in our schools. And in this case, often it is, rushed. We're trying to rush through the material.
Yeah.
Quickly moving from one thing to another. And so I encourage us to inhabit time in a different way in our school, so that we are less locked into the kind of chronos time of the tick 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 of the clock, but really entering into the eternal present. And there are so many resources for us to do that. And in fact, I think that schools are a setting in which there may be more opportunities for us to inhabit time in that way, because of the the natural rhythms of the school year and the week, the natural breaks in the day between classes, between subjects, when we have an opportunity, often not utilized, to pause. To allow, we were talking a little bit about the monastic tradition and, this idea of like the great silence and the monastic orarium. What if we in our schools were to introduce more of those moments of silence, to simply be still and be reminded of the presence of the divine in our midst, and to be reminded that, that the things that we are doing here are, temporal and temporary, and that in fact we are at least invited to be citizens of eternity.
Yeah. The two things come to mind. You're sort of reaching boldly at the whole school schedule, and as you said, that's like a third rail. Some teachers, I think, could hear that and say, well, that's above my pay grade. It's sadly not my problem, even if I'm convinced. But school leaders can be challenged to say, maybe there is a way. I mean, ironically, skole, the word we get school from, comes from the word that means leisure, contemplative time. But we've turned it into this ticking clock, cause of either some kind of hubristic achievement of I've conquered time because I can keep up with it all and check all the boxes. Probably an experience more common for girls in schools, and then or this source of stress and I'm in the wrong place. I'm unable to do this. Maybe slightly more typical of boys in schools, at least at the younger levels. But we've turned it into something that is not contemplative, leisurely, violated the name itself. The heads, so the heads of school. What's some low-hanging fruit for leadership? You started. I mean, you did point at this in your answers. More, there are natural spaces for some silence.
Right.
To introduce silence, to allow ourselves to realize that we're actually embodied and present beings. And we have nature on our side, or, we have our bodies on our side, right? I mean, that, as intimidating as it might be to say, oh, gosh, I got to achieve one more thing. I've got to achieve leisure. But that's how we think, right? That's how busy administrators, might be tempted. But we've got time and our bodies on our side. So what more might you kind of unpack as sort of just an encouragement to say to leaders, this can be done. And then I'm going to pivot to teachers and say, okay, what if your leaders just aren't interested in this conversation? They're going to keep the clip moving through the various subjects, and you got to hit all your standardized test goals and do it in X amount of time on this schedule. What can you do as a teacher in your space, in your classroom, in small ways, to achieve some of this, regardless of the larger ecosystem that you're a part of? So two questions I'm sort of piling up back to back. But for school leaders initially.
So I'd want to say two things to the school leaders. So the first would be that, as someone else has put it, sometimes slowing down is the best way to speed up. That we can be so we can feel for various reasons. Certainly we strive for excellence in our schools, in our classical schools. And we can fall prey to, what I would say is kind of the mindset of the wider culture of a business culture that, that packing in more hours, ratcheting up the productivity, what we are producing in an ever smaller period of time is the way to achieve excellence or results, or however you want to put it. And that's not a very Christian attitude. We have, we think about like the parable of, the sower and the seed. And, there's this idea that, you scatter your seed, but, one seed, the mustard seed can grow into, this giant thing that gives shelter to, to the birds. That, one seed can bear 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And lest I be accused of, dwelling in abstractions, a lot of my research that went into this book was not only, sort of in Christian history or spirituality, but also contemporary psychology, even kind of like business studies. And there's lots of research now available that indicates that doing things like actually, for example, a lot of people are familiar with the Pomodoro method of, setting a timer for 25 minutes so that you'll take a break periodically. And the studies on that sort of thing show that doing that actually makes people more productive in their work and, more creative in their work. And so I want to say that as, again, trying to lower the barrier to entry for the school leaders who often are concerned about, the credentials of the school, about keeping up with other schools, that slowing down, that taking time for leisure, for, moments of prayer, in fact, might make your school more high achieving than it would be otherwise. And secondly, I would say to the school leaders is that there are many practical practices and recommendations in the book, but it really starts with the people. It starts with the head of the school. It starts with the educators. Again, we could sort of teach these sort of things as techniques and require them of our teachers. But if the head of school is himself or herself becoming a more contemplative person, who is more peaceful, who is more docile to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, that is going to permeate the school. Regarding the teachers, I would say, I wrote the book with all these sort of objections, and challenges in mind. And I listened to a lot of teachers in the time that I was working on this. And so at the end of every chapter, you'll see sort of summary points, recommendations, different practices that I talk about throughout the chapter. And the first of each is always something that I just say, for starters, something simple. Because in many places, will be something of a revolution to become a more contemplative place.
Yep.
But there are very many ways that we can begin small. So for example, the teacher in the classroom, even if your head of school isn't quite on board, at this point, the teacher, can work on this for themselves, becoming a more contemplative person. Take even assuring that there is a moment of prayer before walking into that classroom, and kind of stepping on the treadmill for the day. Mm-hmm. But also, as I said, there are these natural rhythms built into the school day, and so as the teacher is moving between periods, moving between subjects, between activities, it does not take a lot of time to simply pause and invite the class into prayer for a moment, or something that I think is familiar to people in classical schools, to take a moment to dwell in wonder. Rather than dissecting, analyzing, talking about the text or the musical composition, to simply sit and marinate in it for a moment.
Yep.
And that not only is that just good for the soul, but there's now increasing amounts of research to show that those things actually renew our attentional resources in such a way that we're better prepared to continue learning after that moment of pause.
Yeah. Thank you. Is there anything for teachers of younger students? As you said, the book primarily focuses on high school, college level as kind of an assumed audience. Just sort of off the top of your head, where might you point grammar school or elementary school teachers as a potential? The history and the theory is going to have application in fairly clear and meaningful ways. But what do you think to that audience? Is this a book for them?
Yeah, it's, again, even though I didn't, most of the examples are from higher levels. Perhaps most of the engagement I've had since the book has come out has been with people from lower levels, and they are finding it useful. So I think most of what is in that second chapter on time and how we inhabit time, the kind of things that we've been talking about, that is relevant. I think a lot in that final chapter about rest and recreation is highly relevant, especially because for our teachers who are, working with the little people, they have even more energy that has to be harnessed and directed. Our younger students have less of a capacity to sit still and maintain focus for an extended period of time.
Yep.
So I think attending to that is very important. So even like one of the studies that I most love and found in my research is that they studied a group of students who were given a break, and in particular given at least 20 minutes to go and run around before taking an exam. And they found, and again, like this is, I think most teachers would say, like, I cannot spare 20 minutes. I have so much to get through today. And what they found was that the resulting difference in the test scores was equivalent to as if the students had received an additional 3 weeks of instruction.
That's amazing.
So don't tell me that you don't have time to let your people, your little people get some exercise.
Yeah, that's powerful. Wow. That's really interesting that some of the main feedback you've gotten is actually from teachers, educators in the lower grades. This overlaps with so many other areas in education as well. It kind of touches everything, like from a central hub point or something. The idea of other types of pedagogical approaches or modes of knowing, like poetic knowledge. You had referenced, wonder and dwelling with the sort of presence and glory and goodness of a thing, rather than simply analyzing it, but sort of being with it. And that, that brings to mind, poetic knowledge as a sort of topic that is written about in some cases. But what are some other pedagogical approaches or theories or other reflection and areas of study on types of ways of knowing things, ways of learning that kind of touch on this topic that might be familiar territory and be, yet another sort of on-ramp or connection for people?
So let me give a couple of examples. Maybe one to throw another bow into the lower grades. So you asked what kind of approaches or practices are appropriate at that level. I'm a big believer in the Montessori method and the way that Sophia Cavalletti adapted that for religious instruction. She referred to it as the catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And I think it's a beautiful pedagogical approach that is essentially encouraging younger children, especially, to learn through play. And so, an example was Cavalletti, would have read with students the parable of the Good Shepherd, and then made available to them little figurines of a shepherd and sheep, and that creates the space, the opportunity for younger children whose brains are still developing. They're still very concrete. To explore that topic, that theme, in a way, that they are best able, that works with the resources that they have. And Cavalletti writes very beautifully about not only the sort of insights and questions that emerge from the students and through this kind of method, but the way that it naturally leads them into prayer. And so we think about kindergartners, first graders as beings with short attention spans. But she shares these anecdotes of her students who had found their way into the chapel and are essentially sitting there in contemplative prayer for 15, 20 minutes because they were moved that way through the lesson. The second that I would mention coming out of the monastic tradition would be Lectio Divina. So I think familiar to very many people coming out of the Benedictine tradition, specifically this method of reading with a passage of Scripture prayerfully, and then progressively leading through these stages of meditating on the text, of having a conversation with God about the text, leading to contemplation. And a number of other authors have written about Lectio Divina and the way that can be used in a variety of pedagogical contexts. But I really feel that it offers something of a template for Christian education, of taking a text. It could be Scripture, it could be something else, but taking the time to read closely, as I think often that's done well in our classical schools. To take a little digestible bit, to read carefully, but then to allow that space for students to sit with it, to immerse themselves in the text. You read these accounts of like the Benedictines and how they would read, and they talk about in very tactile terms of like savoring the text, chewing upon it. So that it can enter into them as the nutrients from the food that we take in, enters into the bloodstream and courses through the body. And so there's the understanding there that this method of Lectio Divina, it would help us to descend from the head to the heart, which I think is something that is so terribly needed today. That we are very often caught up in our heads. We very often are engaging with others in in an intellectual, heady kind of way, but failing to connect on the level of the heart. And often this can be a failure in our schools. We fill students' heads with knowledge, but don't really touch their hearts. So they may know things about Christianity or the classical tradition, but they haven't experienced its beauty. They haven't seen what it means for them, such that they would really want to take this with them after their education is finished.
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully said. I mean, I think that idea of descending from the head into the heart is what C.S. Lewis is talking about, right, in Men Without Chests. What kind of additional reading or contact points? So you're drawing on Joseph Pieper. What are some of the best kind of background sources or next step reads that come to mind? In relation to this topic.
Yeah. Oh boy. I came across so many gems in preparing to write this book. I'd say one for this topic of time that we keep coming back to, and I find that resonates with a lot of people. There's a Carmelite priest named Wilfred Stinnison. Just about anything I've read from him is wonderful, but he has this text called "Eternity in the Midst of Time." Wow. That really shaped my thinking around this, and that's very much a book of spirituality, but I think that's a tremendous resource for for educators to allow themselves to be formed into that sort of that mindset, that way of inhabiting time, because that's going to affect everything that they are doing in their schools. In terms of what, I don't know if it's quite a regret, but something that I lament just a little bit about this book is that I think the issue of attention is so huge. And I do have a section, I believe, in chapter 3 about attention, about nurturing attention. Yeah. But that feels disproportionate to how important I really feel that it is.
You draw on Simone Weil there a little.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Her beautiful text, reflections on the right use of studies with a view to God. I think she encapsulates beautifully why attention is so important. Yeah. This has been much remarked upon, not least among teachers, that we see the sort of shrinking attention spans, excuse me, of our students and just, everybody, it seems.
Oh, it's hitting me. I know that.
Yeah.
It's really getting to us all. Yeah.
But it's such a beautiful text because she comments on the fact that, any school studies, whether you're working on a mathematical proof or, reading through a text, having to stick with it and work through it is developing that capacity of attention, which is important not only, for academics, but it's going to be important in your professional life eventually, but even more so for a life of prayer. She makes this statement about the quality of attention accounts for much of the quality of prayer. And I think there's something that's really true about that. Yeah. But she also says very beautifully towards the end of that essay that most of us would probably never make this connection, but having undergone that ordeal of having to work through, stick with it, a difficult, mathematical proof, for example, she says, even if you don't get the right answer, having exerted yourself and extended your powers of attention in that way may be the thing that prepares you to one day encounter another person in their moment of need and be able to ask with an open heart and attentive ears, what are you going through?
Yeah.
And that probably is one of the most rare gifts in the world today. To really listen and give our attention to another person. But I feel that's precisely the kind of formation that should be occurring in our Christian schools.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Maybe that'll be your next book. Really build up on attention. Are you at all familiar with the essay "Look at Your Fish"?
No, I'm not.
It's in science education circles. It's kind of a cult classic on this topic of attention. Samuel Scudler, who's a student of Agassiz, is a kind of a famous Harvard science professor. And anyway, beautiful little essay. I think you'd enjoy it very much based on what you're sharing here, just about the power of attention. It's interesting because it's in a science classroom, but he sort of locks the student away to draw a fish. And that makes sense because a good scientist is known who needs to be able to pay attention. To things. It's all
I came across an interesting article at one point looking at how these kind of contemplative practices are actually good training for scientists because it trains you to expand your attention, to be able to even to write up one's findings, not in a utilitarian rushed kind of way, but to really sit and dwell with the data, the findings, to see what emerges from that.
Yeah, that's really. I think it sends you back to the kind of the source and the roots of the ground of science or what have you. It's easy to think of some of these topics as kind of naturally connected to faith or the arts, maybe the literature, poetry, visual arts. That's where, or music. That's where contemplation kind of fits. But I do think it is absolutely bedrock, for all the hard sciences as well.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So, what are if you were to write that third book or expand on your area of regret, what are some other resources on attention that you would point to readers to? We've talked about Simon Weil particularly, but are there? Sounds like you've been thinking about that since writing the book, almost.
Yeah, very much so. A couple other quick resources. There's an author named James Lane who teaches up in Massachusetts in Worcester. Has a book, the title of which is escaping me at the moment. That is very, very practical, and it just very practical pedagogical strategies. It's Distracted is the name.
Perfect.
Of the title of the book.
James Lane, Distracted.
Yeah. Why students can't focus and what you can do about it.
Sounds like it's getting very practical.
Yeah. A very, very practical resource. Maybe one of my favorite things that I read that is not practical in the same sort of way was Matthew Crawford's book, The World Beyond Your Head. And he's interesting. He spent a little time working for a think tank, which he did not actually very much enjoy, did not find very intellectually stimulating, and then has been working in specialty motorcycle repair since then. And it's just a fascinating exploration. We were talking about different ways of knowing, and he talks in that book about the kind of intellectual labor that goes into a very tangible project like repairing a motorcycle, where you can't sort of make things up. Like you're bumping up against the rock hard reality of this machine doesn't work, and either I'm going to fix it or I can't.
Yep.
But so lots of his examples are about motorcycle repair or cars or that sort of thing. But he's making a much broader point about how attention has become such a valuable commodity today. You know, again, there's quite a bit that's been written in recent years about the attention economy. And if you think about like the basic business model of social media is our attention is being sold. You know, these devices are designed in very sophisticated ways to keep our eyeballs on the screen as long as possible. And that has detrimental effects on our attention, on who we are. So I love Crawford's language of talking about well-ordered ecologies of attention. And even though he's not always thinking about schools, I read much of the book obviously with schools in mind, and thinking that our schools do have this opportunity to be these well-ordered ecologies of attention, to play, or other authors use language talking about like attention sanctuaries. James Lane talks about the classroom as an attention retreat.
Wow.
I think our schools are a really valuable space, and that's something that I think we as educators really need to be thinking very seriously about today.
Well, that's powerful. I mean, talk about, the name school comes from scholae. They were attention sanctuaries in a world where attention wasn't even under the gun. Attention wasn't being systematically destroyed,
right.
or sort of sold, right?
Right.
Which now it is the main thing we sell is human eyeball time. And that is powerful to say, okay, in a world where attention is absolutely facing a deluge, of destructive kind of challenges, shouldn't schools go back to what they're named after, as attention sanctuaries? Yeah. One book I read a while back, but that really hit on that point of kind of the attention economy, Stand Out of Our Light by James Williams. It's interesting because he's a Google executive, left his job, went to Cambridge and got a PhD in philosophy, and then wrote this book. And Stand Out of Our Light is a quote from one of the cynics, I think Diogenes maybe, but the emperor comes up to him and says, give me a wise word, sage. And he's sitting in the street in the dust, and he says, I was sitting in the sunlight and you're casting a shadow on me. Please move aside and stand out of my light. He doesn't answer his question. You're a distraction to my enjoyment of the sunlight. So just dismisses the emperor. And that's the book title, So it's, it's so many people are noticing that. And schools, you're absolutely right, to challenge schools to say, we ought to be bastions of a kind of alternative. And also Matthew Crawford's point that it's a valuable commodity. Like people who have the capacity for attention now are going to be badly needed because we're all having it sort of taken apart as a capacity. Yeah. Sorry, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was. Your anecdote about the cynic and the emperor. It brings me to another point that I think is really important that I was able to come to articulate in working on this book, which is that because there is so much sort of stacked against us today in terms of so much of modern society conspires against genuine human flourishing, toward the fullness of life that that God is offering us, a virtuous kind of way of living.
Yeah.
And so something like the attention economy, it's, and I find this with with our students, that they feel trapped in it. There was another one of my favorite studies that I came across, a favorite because it's fascinating, but dispiriting because of what it reveals. There was an economist at University of Chicago, surveyed thousands of students across the country about their social media use and asked if how much would we have to pay you to get you off it. And I'll kind of jump to the punchline here that they asked another question. if we told you that we were making the same deal with all of your friends, how much would we have to pay you? And the responses went negative. And in other words, people said, I would pay you to get me and all my friends off social media.
Wow.
So there's an awareness that this is not healthy, and yet our young people especially feel trapped because to get off social media would be to cut themselves off from the social world. And so I think in that state of affairs, another reason why I really believe in the potential of schools at this moment is that that is, it took quite a degree of courage for the cynic to tell the emperor, get out of my light. Most people don't have that courage. And that's sort of what, we're asked to do today, is to tell these tech giants, get out of my way.
Yeah.
But there's so much standing in the way of that. And so I think we're in a moment where there is a need for a kind of collective action. And I've been in touch with people. There's actually a group called Friends of Attention who are trying to do exactly this. They call it attention activism, trying to to organize communities to have a collective response to this situation. But I think that that kind of community and that potential for organization is there in our schools, and maybe especially in the kind of communities embodied in classical schools.
Yeah. Well, that's a great challenge. What a clarion call to say, we need leaders who will stand up to the giants. I love that you went there and, compared the emperor to the tech giants. But yeah.
Our connection is probably going to get cut off any second now.
Yeah, the satellites will drift away. But it is, what a statistic that the young people are saying, help us. And if the school leaders can't respond to the young people and say, let us give you a sanctuary, God help us. So powerful. Well, your book's title is Be Still and Know. And we've talked a lot about time, and you gave the beautiful recommendation of a Carmelite scholar who's talking about eternity as within time. I'm not, remembering the title exactly, but I'm definitely going to be looking that one up.
Eternity in the Midst of Time, Wilfred Stinnison.
Yeah, I'll be looking that one up. And that concept, I think, is a powerful piece of how you're kind of making your title possible for people as you, over the course of your book. But I'm circling back and saying how. Well, let me put it this way. In the tradition, there's a lot of talk about the active life and the contemplative life, and they're not actually necessarily kind of a conflict. They actually are meant to be kind of in a harmony, and the one kind of makes the other possible almost. Contemplative, I think, makes the active possible, and we've put everything in conflict right nowadays. It's everything's some kind of an opposition, competing with each other, etc. But I think you're saying with Be Still and Know. That you can achieve great things in your schools. You can, have great outcomes and, a great active life, but it's actually empowered by a sort of being still. Am I trying to say that correctly?
Nope, you're not forcing that one bit. No, it's certainly something that I want to convey in this book. And that's one of the reasons for those kind of anecdotes at the beginning of the chapters. The very first one is sort of describing an experience not at all fictional, of trying to get to work in the morning. Yeah. Because I want people to know right off the bat that this is not pie in the sky, that this is coming from a fellow educator, who feels all those pressures, including the time constraints. And yet this is, one does not have to run off to a monastery to enjoy something of the contemplative life. And so that's why I give lots of attention in the book, drawing not only from the Benedictine tradition that we've talked about, but also the Ignatian and the Dominican traditions, which are more active communities. They're not cloistered. They have active apostolates of teaching and missionary work. And so I'm drawing from those traditions to look at how Christians in various contexts, never living in perfect times, always with their own challenges, have adapted these contemplative practices to their context. So, to take the Jesuits, for example, they developed because they wanted to be ready at a moment's notice to serve the orders of the Pope or to go wherever they were needed. So they felt they needed to be
a very kind of active.
That's
calm.
right.
Yeah.
So they felt they couldn't be constrained by the monastic orarium as it existed in an earlier time. So something that became very important in the Ignatian tradition was the examen. This moment in every day, or possibly a couple of moments, maybe at midday, maybe at the end of the day, where the good Jesuit or any of us can pause to reflect on the day, to look for the moments where God was present, to receive and to be grateful for God's love. Yeah. And so, the tradition is just, littered with, with these kind of examples and these kind of practices that are there for even the busiest of person to adopt and to bring that moment of stillness into what might otherwise be a very busy day.
Yeah, that's encouraging. What kinds of ways are you active or present in K-12 schools? It sounds like you have some correspondence, with people reading your book and kind of giving you feedback. Is that the faculty that you've worked with and kind of originally developing the concept of this book as a college, they're colleagues in a college setting. But do you or any of your colleagues kind of have any regular presence or interaction, support to, or just correspondence with, K-12 teachers?
Well, I'm the parent of a pre-K student and a first grader and a fourth grader. So
there you go.
It's hard to get much more immersed than that.
That's the truth. Yeah.
And I did a workshop for for the teachers of our archdiocese in the past year. As I said, I have contacts in a variety of schools, including elementary schools, and so I'm often being asked to come and do work with them, but also I'm always eager to listen and to hear what's going on in the ground, and as people are trying to implement this kind of vision for education, what's working, what people are finding challenging, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it comes across in your book. You sound like the K-12 world, and I was sort of actually feeling like you were writing to them, so it was that much of a connection, and that's our primary audience. So I'm kind of reiterating that for them. I love the one angle you have of this kind of hey, the secular world is onto this. Come on, Christians, we can remember what really was our gift to the world and enjoy it. And even champion it. We should be leaders in this. And a part of that for Christian educators is that we can do this in specifically Christian ways. So, integrating it into prayers and religious life. What are some ways that you've seen in schools that you think are particularly effective or beautiful instances of that where, specifically Christian worship, prayer, kind of shows up in ways that are formative and undergirding of contemplative life rather than maybe just one more thing in the schedule, that has to be fit in.
Yeah. So maybe, maybe to give a different kind of example from things that we've been talking about before, because we haven't touched much on, I have a chapter on community.
Yeah.
And, so thinking a lot there about, the ways that students and faculty, the adults, are learning to relate to each other, to work together the way that we form community, but also talking very practically, for the educators about some of the challenges of working together, of meetings and that sort of thing, and how this tradition can inform all that. But one of the joys of the work and preparation for this book was spending time at a high school. I'll give a high school example, St. Benedict Prep here in New Jersey, in Newark. And one of the things that most struck me about this place is their morning convocation. Now it's I think it's a common enough practice in many schools to have at lower levels there might be like a homeroom or a morning meeting that sort of thing.
Right.
In their case, because it's a Benedictine school, and you see the Benedictine commitment to community, because the entire school would meet every morning. And that was a time, for some announcements, but also the entire school would pray together, would sing together, and celebrate, victories and achievements together. And it was, as opposed to maybe many other schools, assemblies I've seen, I was struck by the palpable sense of community, of togetherness at this convocation, of students. I remember the headmaster towards the end telling the students to look to the person to the left of you, look to the right at you, tell them you love them, tell them it's going to be a great day, and then the students linking arms and swaying back and forth, singing together. And so, one of the insights of our Christian tradition is, again, that we are these embodied beings, and we forget that at our peril. And so there are more, fascinating studies on the benefits of singing together, for example. Studies find that our heart rates actually synchronize when we sing together.
Wow.
And so it's generating, these feelings, these experiences of togetherness. And I think this is so important. This is such a gift for today, when the rates of loneliness are skyrocketing, and that's linked to so many mental health problems, linked to lower achievement in school. And so again, even if this might be perceived as like taking away from instructional time, to actually invest in that kind of community is, I think, educators will find that will bear fruit in other aspects of the school. So I think I promised 2 examples. I gave one, but I've been talking for a long time, so I'll pause there at least. Yeah,
no, that's great. Thank you. I think you have rich examples in your book, and examples are such a great way in. But I really appreciate your mix of kind of history, theory, practical advice, which I think is probably one of the richest strains, and then examples to kind of illustrate it. So, I'll ask one last question that's just kind of autobiographical. Your own, you talked about how you came about, writing a book on this topic, but your own kind of Christian spiritual journey. Have you been Catholic all your life? What kinds of other experiences have you had? And what to give this not just an autobiographical spin, but how do you think this applies? Outside of the most obvious, I'm Orthodox, you're Catholic. an audience could say, well, yeah, of course they'd be talking about this, and sort of it. But this is, I firmly believe, and I know you do, very much a part of and available across traditions. So I'm just wondering both your own experiences and your personal, life that cross some of these boundaries in Christian traditions, and then how is this available to all believers?
Lest I forget about that last part, I mean, let me just say something briefly about that. It's I hope it's an assurance to to the readers or potential readers that you mentioned that David Smith wrote a foreword for the book, that Jamie Smith, J.K.A. Smith, both at Calvin University, gave their endorsement, and I'm finding this is interesting that there are. I see an increasing number of people from other Christian traditions who are discovering, rediscovering, appropriating, this tradition of contemplation. And so, right. So it's not just a Catholic thing or Orthodox thing, but I think many people are finding value in this and how it takes them deeper into their prayer life, helps them to live in a more human way, and as I try and show in the book, it turns out to be really good for education as well. So to speak personally, I have been Catholic my whole life, product of Catholic schools from kindergarten through graduate school.
So you come by all the anecdotes rather honestly.
Yes. Plenty to draw from there. But have always really enjoyed conversations, and gone to school on dialogue with people from other traditions. I often repeat to my students if they cast a funny eye at when I assign a Protestant theologian or something like that, I say, the one who knows one knows none. If all you know is your own tradition, you don't even really understand that, because you don't know how, you don't understand how it's different from what else is out there and how people arrived at those particular convictions. So I have been Catholic my whole life. Raised Catholic, really inspired by my theology teachers at St. Ignatius High School in Cleveland. One of the places I was privileged to go back in the time that I was working on this book and spend some time there.
Oh, that's rich. Cool.
And, so inspired is seeing really what the Christian life could be like in so many different dimensions, but thoroughly enjoying the conversations in those theology classes. And I think at that point really experiencing for the first time theology as opposed to a religious instruction or catechesis, to really be able to, explore, to open up these kind of issues. But then, just to skip to the present day, we've talked a couple of times about this group of faculty that I worked with here at Seton Hall. So Seton Hall is a Catholic university, and we would say, because we're Catholic, open and inclusive to people from all walks of life. We have our convictions, but we want to share that with anyone who's willing to be a part of it.
The root word Catholic, the root of the word Catholic, right?
That's right.
Is everyone?
Is a universal, right?
Yeah.
And so this group of faculty was representative in that regard, that we had people who had different kinds of Christian backgrounds, Buddhist, Jewish, some people who would just sort of call themselves seekers. And that was one of the beautiful things of that group, that, I was sharing from the Christian tradition, but also often drawing upon other traditions, and we found that these contemplative practices were a sort of common ground among us. That wherever people were coming from, and people were coming from very different places, that they experienced, a sense of wholeness and community, through these kind of practices and these wisdom traditions. And so it was a beautiful experience of coming together.
Well, that's great. I think that can be an encouragement to classical Christian schools that they have something to offer, to the humanity of everyone. That is clearly the need is felt out there in a wide variety of ways. So thank you so much, Patrick. It's been a real pleasure catching up with you about your book, meeting you in this context, and I hope you'll keep writing, and we'll have more to talk about. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesse.
Yep.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yep. Bye. You've been listening to the ClassicalU Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and for following us with our courses, training teachers, parents, school leaders on ClassicalU.com. Our training platform is owned and operated by Classical Academic Press. As listeners, you can purchase any book from Classical Academic Press outside of our digital items, as well as any ClassicalU subscription at our special listener discount of 10% off. Just enter the code CU Podcast, all one word, at the point of purchase to receive this discount on any book or ClassicalU.com subscription. Finally, please also watch for live learning webinars in collaboration with Schole Academy, which offers live online courses for primary and secondary students. Thank you for listening.